Dori is finally out, and this is an honest look at how she works with different teams and weapons at Constellation Zero. So here's exactly what you need to know about her in this showcase video. So after spending a week on the media server with Dori, it seems like she's quite a unique support, and surprisingly enough, she actually has a couple of really good builds. Now in this video, Dori is level 90 at Constellation Zero, with talent levels shown here, and she will be using various artifacts and weapons, which I will display at the bottom part of this video. But let's talk about damage. I mean, just the animations alone are of the highest tier. Surely the numbers are also great, right? Yeah, not really. Even if the damage is already bad enough, the animations themselves are painfully slow. So in reality, this is nothing more than just a way to show off her genie. Now, her elemental skill is pretty simple. It deals roughly 5,000 damage if we count all the shots without any buffs. And I am using here a full noblesse build with a Favonius weapon. I want to show you realistic numbers first, because playing her as a support will be the main way to take advantage of everything she has to offer. But you might be wondering, didn't Electro get buffed with the new Quicken reaction? Well, yeah, but even if I use a C2 Kazuha with Freedom Sworn who has VV artifact set equipped, this will only boost Dori's skill damage to about 60,500. Keep in mind her skill has the standard ICD, so only the first hit that lands will become quickened. Now, her burst damage is even more sad. As long as the active character is nearby an enemy or the connector is touching them, every 0.4 seconds it will deal around 620 damage. Obviously, this is bad, even if you can potentially cause this to happen a total of 30 times. But then, what about Quicken? Well, it seems Hoyoverse yet again have created a special ICD for a character, which means Dori's burst will only trigger a reaction every 3 seconds or so. This basically means the burst can trigger 4 reactions in total, which is not an ideal amount if you're expecting her to be a good electro applicator. And again, using someone like Kazuha, he can boost that aggravate damage from connector to about 8,300. So, in total, if she deals just pure damage from her burst and skill without any buffs, and assuming it's a single target, it will be around 24,500 damage. And if assuming all of this damage is boosted by a powerful Animo unit like Kazuha, and all 5 Quicken reactions are caused, the numbers end up around 77,000 damage. So yeah, I don't believe she is good or even decent unit to rely on damage, and this becomes even more clear when I talk about her burst performance in the Abyss. Okay, so with the bad part out of the way, what about her healing? Well, it's actually really good. By using the same build where I showcase damage, any active character when the burst is active will regain around 4,100 health every 2 seconds. And since this will happen a total of 6 times, this will end up around 25,000 health recovered. That's actually way more better than Cookie's healing, because I could only achieve this number with Cookie when using a dedicated healer build, while here, just by using a standard damage dealer / support build, Dori is already matching up with Cookie. And let's not forget that Cookie also takes damage each time she uses healing, which often hurts in the longer Abyss runs. Also, keep in mind the connector radius is slightly bigger than Bennett's burst, so don't walk too far away from the lamp, or else you will lose the burst benefits. But now, if I equip on Dori a full dedicated healer build using the bell, her burst will heal around 9,500 points. That's actually kinda crazy. And the first thing that I wanted to test is to see how much damage will the bubble pop do from the clam artifact set she's using. Sadly, it will only be around 8,500 damage, or 15,000 on superconducted targets, and I think the main reason why this damage is so low is that first of all, only one character gets healed. Unlike with Chi-Chi or Kokomi, who can heal the whole team, it's just harder to reach the maximum bubble damage. However, on the bright side, if using her in a superconduct team, her total damage from this build is only 16% weaker when compared to using her in a Quicken team. Still, it's probably gonna be easier to increase her damage further in Quicken teams. Also, a quick note about the bell. I honestly think this weapon is still pretty much mediocre on Dori. The passive effect which generates the shield, well, it disappears if you switch her out, the damage increase is also not relevant, and most importantly, Dori still needs a lot of energy recharge, so you'll probably end up using ER sands on her with the bell, which in this case, it's not a terrible deal, but on the other hand, Favonius weapon can supply particles for the team. Speaking of which, the last thing I want to talk about is her energy. You see, at maximum talent level, her burst in addition to healing will also restore 2.5 energy, or a total of 15 flat energy, so ER cannot further increase it, but when I used her in a team with Eula, it did feel useful on the Vengeful Lady. So it's pretty awesome thing to have when Dori's burst is healing and restoring energy to the active character. Now on the other hand, her her skill has two passive talents, one of which will simply reduce its cooldown by 1 second if a connected character to the burst causes a reaction every 3 seconds, which is fine. I didn't really find it that useful in all of the rotations I've tested. However, what really surprised me was her second passive. Basically, by using her skill, you'll see this quick animation appear in her, and after the skill hits an enemy, she will restore 5 energy for every 100% of ER she has. So this means she will always restore 5 energy by the minimum. But here's the thing, her energy recharge actually affects this number, and if you're using something like the Sacrificial Greatsword, this passive talent can also be triggered both times. I mean, I think this is a smart solution to her energy needs, because she does have a hefty 80 burst cost, but with this passive talent alone, you can easily hover around 140 to 160 ER, depending on what weapon you have. So you can instead focus on HP substats for better healing, or even elemental mastery if you want her aggravate damage to be better. All in all, I think it's pretty clear her personal damage potential is mediocre at best, although Quicken reactions and the Clam artifact set can help improve it, but honestly, her two biggest selling points so far seem to be healing and energy generation for the team, and I think now is the best time to showcase her in some team comps. Okay, so let's talk about our first team, the good old Eula comp. Now, as an Electro applicator, Dori has some really tough competition to go up against, which is mainly made up of Raiden and Fischl. Obviously, she won't even get close to matching their raw damage output, but in exchange, she does get to heal Eula, and in this specific rotation, Eula can actually regenerate energy from Dori's burst while she's busy doing her usual burst shenanigans. And in this showcase, I've noticed that Eula's energy recharge was only at 110%, but I was almost always able to use her burst off cooldown. Granted, the team was using two Favonius weapons, so I think a more realistic scenario would be around 140 ER on Eula, but still, this is actually pretty awesome when Dori is included in this team. Obviously, Diona could do the same if not better for Eula, however, you could also go with Beto in this variation, which would now also mean that Dori could help with Beto's ER issues as well. You might have also noticed I'm mainly showcasing the Clam Forset with Favonius on Dori. Well, that's because, as I said, the Bell, it provides decent amount of HP from substat, but it's still better to get particles from Favonius. Although this also means you need to build critical rate on Dori, so if you don't want to do that, you could also go for Sacrificial Greatsword. But overall, Dori in Eula physical, or I guess in any physical team that wants to superconduct, is pretty decent. I think I would still prefer using Fischl or Raiden over her, but at least she can heal, so if you're struggling with that, that's an option. Also, if you are using Favonius weapon here, the Noblesse Forset ends up as a viable option. And speaking of which, this next build is using the very same Noblesse I just talked about, and a fully refined Forest Regalia. I already said this in my last video about the new Sumeru weapons, but the leaf that shows up on the ground from the passive can be a bit annoying to grab it. However, value-wise, if everything is working in the right order, Dori will now heal and restore energy to the active character, Noblesse Forset will boost team's attack, and the Forest Regalia will boost someone's EM by 120. So yeah, I think that's pretty good with all things considered. Also, I know it's becoming annoying by this point, but you could also just give her Favonius weapon instead, just so she could generate particles for the team. But this got me thinking, who actually struggles with energy in Quicken teams? The most popular units so far are Keqing, Fischl, and Dendro Traveler. They don't really need help with it, especially Fischl and Keqing. But the Traveler, I guess you could say with Dori's help, and if they are connected to her burst, might benefit from a few energy points, but you don't usually spend more than a second or two on the Traveler in Quicken teams. So this means you still gotta build the Traveler with energy recharge in mind anyway. Still, I guess there's Sucrose, Beto, Kazuha, and Tignari as viable units who can benefit from Dori's energy generation, especially Tignari. If you have 0 ER built on him, even if he has 40 burst cost, you still need some to activate the burst off cooldown, especially if he's the only Dendro unit. But remember, in Quicken teams, the gameplay style is focused around quick swapping, so we will rarely have someone take up a lot of field time, which means Dori's burst energy generation will be distributed if not evenly to everyone, then at least not on one character only. Basically what I'm trying to say is that in Quicken teams, I only found her healing and other buffs to be relevant, while the burst energy generation was situational at best. Finally, you might be wondering, what about Hyperbloom Dori? I mean, at first it looked like it was pretty good. Just by testing alone, I could see that the burst connector has decent coverage range to trigger the Dendro cores, and even the active character itself has a small radius that can trigger Hyperblooms. But the problem quickly becomes clear when you actually go and fight in the Abyss. Here, with this Ayato Hyperbloom team, I quickly noticed that if you do not keep repositioning him when the connector is active, the Dendro cores will simply expire and explode. Like, you have to understand one, anytime you try to move around and make the connector trigger the Dendro course, this would be an automatic DPS loss, a time you could otherwise spend doing damage with characters by just standing in place. So no, I don't believe Dori is good for triggering hyperblooms, but if I discover some new way how she can work well as a hyperbloom triggerer, check out the video's pinned comment. Overall, I think Dori is pretty good in Eula physical team, decent in Quicken teams, and not so great with hyperblooms. The main 3 weapons that seem like the best fit for her are Favonius, Sacrificial, and Forest Regalia. Worst case scenario, you could go for the Bell for better healing, but it's very likely she'll need energy sands to achieve consistent burst activation. Otherwise, there's few 3-star and niche 4-star options shown here that can work until you can get a better weapon. And as for the artifacts, Noblesse and Clam 4 sets are definitely the best choice, although I would say Noblesse is more well-rounded and can be used in basically any team, while Clam for the most part is best utilized in physical superconduct teams, so that the bubble can pop for more damage. But ultimately, since her overall performance besides healing is kind of average, you could also give her the Instructor set, which will be especially good in Quicken teams. So, what do I think about Dori? Well, I really wanted to say this. I think her overall performance is hunky-dory. At C0, her damage is lackluster, electro application is average at best, but on the other hand, she can heal for decent amount, even if it's one single active target. Her energy generation from the burst, while situational, can work really well in some teams. And most important of all, while she does have an expensive burst cost, it can be managed thanks to her second passive talent. And with some weapons like Sacrificial Greatsword, you could even say she becomes a decent battery for herself and other electro characters like Beidou. Now, if I had to pick between Cookie Shinobu and Dori, I would probably lean towards Cookie just because she has better electro application and it's in a wide area around the character. She can also be used in hyperblooms and in Quicken teams, and overall she can deal more damage than Dori when utilizing the new Dendro reactions. However, Cookie's self-damage from using the skill is pretty annoying and can lead to frustrating abyss runs, and she also needs to solve her ER issues. While in Dori's case, she can heal for a lot more. It's easier for her to manage her burst energy, and she can further help the team with keeping their ER values lower. Honestly, I think C0 isn't really the best way to judge characters' long-term growth, so I will be making a second video on Dori with all her constellations unlocked, so make sure to subscribe to my channel and wait for the video's release. But yeah, I think Dori is just fine. I really love her normal attack animations, and I spent a lot of time using her in world exploration, just so I could see her genie go crazy with the claymore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I am always putting in a lot of work just so I can give you an honest opinion, and I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video to show some support. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.